In June of 1906, the famous Arctic explorer Robert E. Peary, who, if we know our history, later became the first man to reach the North Pole in 1909, was studying the horizon from Cape Colgate, which is at the most northwestern tip of North America. He noticed the polar ice packs, which are well known, everyone knew about those. But to the northwest, he saw what appeared to be a distant land, and even named this distant land Crocker Land, after one of his financial bankers. When he returned to the United States, the American Museum of Natural History in New York backed Peary with $6,000 to return and set foot on this newly discovered land. And back in 1909, that was a pretty small fortune, right? But a fortune nonetheless. $6,000. After a dangerous journey, the team was rewarded with the glorious sight of this land. One member wrote, "We ran to the top of the highest mount. There could be no doubt about it. Great heavens, what a land! Hills, valleys, snow-capped peaks extending through at least 120 degrees of horizon." After they traveled for another day, they stopped and took their measurements to find out how far they were into this new land. Shocked, they realized they were 150 miles onto the polar ice cap when they were sure they had traveled 30 miles into the new land, inland. Finally, they realized that Crocker Land didn't actually exist. Disappointed, they turned around and started back home. On the way back, however, they turned and saw Crocker Land still visible and wrote, "There was land everywhere. Had we not just come from far over the horizon, we would have returned to our country and reported land just as Peary did." Because of delays, the expedition lasted 5 years and ended up costing over $100,000. Which, if I said $6,000 was a fortune in 1909, imagine how much $100,000 in 1909 was. Now, what are all these famous accounts, of these famous examples? What are these examples of? Starts with an M. Mirage, you got it. They're all mirages. Famous mirages that people were sure they saw something. They were sure. They testified to it. They went back to the American Museum of Natural History and they said, "I saw this land with my own eyes. Give me money to go back and set foot on this new land." They were sure that it was there. But in reality, they were just mirages. They didn't actually exist. Just as these people were sure how they saw things, they were sure that these things existed. People during Jesus' time were sure about what they saw. They were sure that Jesus was doing something that they had in their own minds, when in reality, it's not exactly what Jesus was doing. So if we go to our text here, I'm going to back up to verse 28 right here. The verse right before. When he had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. And if we remember back to what Pastor Wayne has been talking about the past few weeks, what has he mentioned over and over again? That Jesus is heading towards where? Jerusalem. Right, that's the direction he's heading. He has a plan. So this is still reiterating that Jesus has a plan. He knows where he's going. He's going to Jerusalem. And verse 28 reiterates that. And when it came to pass, when he drew near to Bethphage and Bethany, at the mountain called Olivet, that he sent 2 of his disciples, saying, "Go into the village opposite you, where as you enter you will find a colt tied on which no one has ever sat. Loose it and bring it here. And if anyone asks you, 'Why are you loosing it?' thus you shall say to him, 'Because the Lord has need of it.'" So those who were sent went their way and found it just as he had said to them, which in itself is a miracle, right? We kind of glance right over that. But Jesus says, "Go into this village. There you'll find a baby donkey, a colt, on which no one has ever sat." And they found it just as he described. "Loose it and bring it here. And if anyone..." So they went on their way and found it just as he had said to them. But as they were loosing the colt, the owners of it said to them, "Whoa, all right, you're coming into my backyard, you're coming into my barn, and you're taking my livestock. What's going on here? What are you doing?" And they said the Lord has need of him. And then when we look at verse 35, do we see anything in between verse 34 and verse 35 where they said, okay, give us a moment, give us a break. And they went back in their business room and they said, okay, well, let's write out the pros and cons of this. Let's see, can we get any rent for this maybe? Maybe let's have a huddle. Let's figure out what we can make off of this. No, it just jumps to verse 35 and brought him to Jesus. So the cult owners just let them have their livestock, which back then was extremely valuable. So we look at that and we're like, well, that's odd. Why did they just do that? If someone showed up to my house and said, here, let me take your TV, right? Let me take your computer. Let me take all your stuff, basically. Because God has need of it. Right? We look at them like, sure, God has need of it, right? But the cult owners, see, they had something in the back of their mind. Okay, there's something going on here. There's something going on here. So what is going on in the back of their mind? To answer that question, we're going to turn back to an ancient prophecy in Zechariah 9:9. Zechariah 9:9. And in the Pew Bibles, that is on page 9. No, that isn't correct. Zechariah 9:9. It's the end of the New Testament here. Towards the end of the New Testament. It's on page 822. 822 in the Pew Bibles. 822. Zechariah 9:9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. So, they knew this, a lot of Israelites knew this prophecy very well. They were looking for a Messiah. They were looking for their king. The cult owners said, well, okay, we've heard this guy Jesus. We know he's done all these miracles. We know he's teaching about the kingdom of God. Now he wants a donkey. Okay, hang on a second. Could he be the Messiah? Well, if he is, let's give him why would we withhold our baby donkey from the Messiah? If this is how he's going to announce that he's the Messiah. And so that is why they let the disciples have it. A reason. One reason at least. And then they brought the donkey to Jesus. We're back in Luke chapter 19. Then they brought him to Jesus. And many threw their own clothes on the colt when they set Jesus on it. So Jesus knew what he was doing. He was proclaiming to be the Messiah. He was proclaiming to be the king of Israel. And he knew exactly what he was. He picked a time and the place for it. Because we're about to observe Holy Week, right? And this is Palm Sunday of Holy Week. And Thursday/Friday, because some people observe Passover the next day. But on Thursday of Holy Week is when people observe Passover. And so everyone's in Jerusalem to prepare for Passover. Everyone's coming to Jerusalem. And so Jesus knew there was going to be a ton of people in Jerusalem. A ton of people with this messianic prophecy on their mind, because it is a highly religious feast in the Jewish faith, Passover. And he knew Passover too, right? That what would a Passover embody? What was the meaning of Passover? When God came and passed over the houses that had the blood of the lamb over there on their doorposts. So God saved those by the blood of the lamb.